The least skilled people in any domain rate their ability at the 62nd percentile. That is not a rounding error. That is a systematic misjudgment your brain makes every day, and it has a name: the Dunning-Kruger effect. People who perform in the bottom quarter of a test believe they are above average. They genuinely think they scored better than most others. And the people who actually do perform the best, they tend to underestimate themselves, placing themselves around the 68th percentile despite being in the top 10%. This video will show you exactly why your brain does this, why it is almost impossible to fix on your own, and what the number 62 really means for your daily life. The original study that uncovered this bias was published in 1999 by David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger at Cornell University. They gave college students tests in humor, grammar, and logical reasoning. After the test, every student was asked to estimate how they performed compared to their peers. The results were striking. In every test, the bottom quartile of actual performers rated themselves at the 62nd percentile. They were not being sarcastic or trying to look good. They genuinely believed they had done well. Meanwhile, the top quartile placed themselves at the 68th percentile, which is actually an underestimation since their true scores place them much higher. The pattern held across multiple domains and multiple groups. Why does this happen? The answer lies in metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. To accurately judge whether you have answered a logic puzzle correctly, you need the same logical skills that the puzzle tests. If you lack those skills, you lack the tools to recognize your mistakes. You cannot see what you do not understand. This creates a dual burden. You make errors, and you are unaware that you are making errors. It is like trying to read a map. Without knowing what the symbols mean, you think you are on the right road. But the map is nonsense to you. This is not just a laboratory curiosity. The Dunning-Kruger effect appears in everyday situations that you have almost certainly encountered. Think about your own driving ability. Most people rate themselves as above average drivers, even though by definition half the population is below average. The same bias shows up in grammar, emotional intelligence, financial literacy, and even medical knowledge. Patients who know the least about a disease are often the most confident that they understand it. Doctors, who know the most, are more likely to say it is complicated, and they might be wrong. One striking real-world demonstration comes from a 2008 study on medical students and skin condition diagnosis. Researchers showed students images of skin lesions and asked them to classify them as benign or malignant. Students who scored in the bottom quartile rated their diagnostic accuracy as significantly higher than it actually was. They believed they had performed in the top half, when in fact they were near the bottom. The students with the most accurate diagnoses, the top performers, rated their accuracy more modestly. They were aware of how many cases were ambiguous and how easily a lesion could be misread. This pattern matters because in medicine, overconfidence can lead to missed diagnoses or unnecessary treatments. The patient's health depends on a doctor knowing when they are unsure. Yet the very structure of medical education often reinforces confidence over doubt. A second line of evidence comes from studies that train incompetent people and watch their self-assessments change. In the original experiment, some of the bottom quartile participants were given a short training session and then asked to reevaluate their performance. After training, they lowered their self-ratings significantly. They had become slightly better at the task, but more importantly, they had gained enough skill to recognize how bad they had been before. This suggests that the bias is not a fixed personality flaw. It is a lack of the necessary knowledge to see your own limits. Once you learn even a little, your overconfidence drops. But there is a limit to this effect. Not every incompetent person is overconfident, and not every expert is humble. The Dunning-Kruger effect is strongest in domains where feedback is slow, ambiguous, or absent. For example, if you play a video game and die immediately, the feedback is clear you were wrong to think you were good. Your self-assessment will adjust fast. But in domains like politics, management, or investing, the consequences of your decisions are often delayed and confounded by many factors. You can make bad choices and never connect them to your own incompetence because life gets in the way. A 2011 study from the National Bureau of Economic Research illustrates this point with financial literacy. Researchers measured people's actual knowledge of basic finance, such as compound interest and inflation, and then asked them to rate their own financial knowledge. Those with the lowest objective scores were the most likely to rank themselves above average. They also made the worst real-world financial decisions, taking out high-interest loans, failing to diversify, or paying excessive fees. The feedback on these choices can take years to arrive, and by then the person may have already rationalized the outcome as bad luck or external factors. Finance becomes a perfect breeding ground for the Dunning-Kruger effect because the truth is slow to catch up with confidence. Culture also matters. Studies in East Asian countries have found a smaller overconfidence gap among the least skilled. This may be due to cultural values that emphasize humility and self-criticism. In societies where modesty is expected, people suppress their true self-estimates even if they secretly feel confident. The Dunning-Kruger effect is not a universal law of human nature. It is a bias that emerges when people are left to their own internal sense of competence, without external correction. So what can you do about it in your own life? The obvious advice is to seek honest feedback from people who know more than you. But that is easier said than done. When you lack expertise, you cannot evaluate whether the feedback is accurate. You might dismiss a mentor who tells you that you are wrong because you think you are right. The most effective strategy is to deliberately compare yourself to objective standards. Take tests, get external certifications, or ask for specific examples of your mistakes. Do not trust your own feeling of certainty. That feeling is the very thing that the Dunning-Kruger effect exploits. There is a deeper lesson here about confidence and competence. The people who are the most confident are often the least competent, and the most competent are filled with doubt. This is not a paradox. It is a consequence of knowing the full complexity of a domain. Experts have seen so many ways to fail that they are acutely aware of their own limitations. Novices have only seen the surface. Their confidence is genuine but hollow. The wise person knows what they do not know, as the old saying goes, and that wisdom is exactly what the incompetent lack. The Dunning-Kruger effect is often reduced to a meme about stupid people not realizing they are stupid. But that misses the point. It applies to everyone in areas where they are new or unskilled. You were once a terrible driver and probably thought you were fine. You have likely been overconfident in a hobby you just started, from chess to guitar to cooking. The bias is a fundamental feature of how human learning works. The gap between actual ability and self-assessment is widest at the beginning of the learning curve, when you know just enough to feel competent, but not enough to see your errors. A practical consequence of this pattern is that the Dunning-Kruger effect can sabotage your career growth. Imagine starting a new job. In the first few weeks, you learn the basics and feel competent, but you are still missing the deeper knowledge that distinguishes a novice from an expert. Your overconfidence may cause you to stop asking questions, to take on tasks you are not ready for, or to dismiss feedback from more experienced colleagues. This is not arrogance. It is simply your brain trying to protect your sense of competence. Many people plateau in their development precisely because they do not recognize how much they do not know. The most effective learners deliberately cultivate a state of intellectual humility, especially early in the learning curve. They assume they are probably overconfident and actively seek out ways to be proven wrong. A famous follow-up study asked, "What if you show incompetent people how their peers performed?" That helped, but only partly. When the bottom quartile saw that others had done much better, they adjusted their self-ratings downward. But they still remained overconfident relative to their actual score. The correction was incomplete because they lacked the ability to fully understand why the others were better. They could see the outcome, but not the underlying skill difference. This is why pure exposure to examples is not enough. You need explanation of the criteria, the reasoning, the details that separate poor from excellent. The number 62 is a reminder that your brain is wired to protect your self-image, even when that protection misleads you. You do not want to think of yourself as below average, so you unconsciously inflate your self-assessment. This is not laziness or stupidity. It is a cognitive bias that evolved because, for most of human history, overconfidence helped you take risks and pursue opportunities even when the odds were unclear. In a modern world of complex skills and delayed feedback, that same bias can trap you in mediocrity. The next time you feel completely sure you aced a test, or that you are the only one in the room who sees the obvious solution, stop for a second. Ask yourself one question: what would it look like if I were wrong? The ability to doubt your own certainty is not a weakness. It is the mark of someone who knows how much they have yet to learn. The most competent people are the ones who keep asking that question, even when they are right. Because the moment you stop doubting yourself, you might just be at the 62nd percentile and have no idea.